Hello. So this one partially relates to that recent video I made about the kitchen restaurant in Edinburgh and the allegations that have emerged against that. Now, just a caveat there: if Tom Kitchen, the proprietor of that establishment, is completely innocent, and in our system we believe in due process, he has a right to deny the allegations. Everything I've said is simply quoting what is already reported in national papers. Um, I happen to believe that 13 independent people making allegations, the plausibility that they're all lying or concocting it is far-fetched. And I happen to think that Tom Kitchen, if he's innocent, for example, of the assault allegations, at the very least, he needs to make it clear that there is not that culture in his establishment. And from what I saw on his Facebook page, the official response to this was quite dismissive. It was boasting about his success and talking about an inquiry, but didn't actually say that we don't tolerate this culture, which to me, I think that's a red flag. To me, that is saying, well, we're embarrassed that we got caught out and I don't like these allegations, but look at my success. I found it quite dismissive and I took issue with that. But like I say, he might be totally innocent. Um, it's a power dynamic because when you have a situation, for example, in that restaurant environment, I'm not just talking about Tom Kitchen, I'm talking in any restaurant, or indeed any power dynamic. Because when we saw the Weinstein allegations, or this, you could look at Bill Cosby and other examples. Indeed, one of the best known in this country is the Jimmy Savile scandal. Well, what happened? You had the young women, girls really, children in some cases, who were abused by Savile when they tried to do something about it back in the 70s and 80s. They were told that they were a nuisance. So, when people say, oh, why are people only coming forward now? They need to consider that. They need to consider that it isn't always easy to speak out, especially when the person doing it is revered or admired or they are in a position of power. So it takes a few initial brave whistleblowers to actually do that. The other side of it, of course, is you could have totally innocent people like Cliff Richard who are totally destroyed by false allegations. So, it's about striking a balance, empowering people who may have been victims to have the confidence to come forward, but also not taking allegations in of themselves as facts. So even in the case of the kitchen in Edinburgh, I'm not saying he is definitely guilty. I don't know. Um, but let him deny it. And this independent investigation, it needs to be thorough. I have to say though, when I see his restaurant promoted, and people are saying customers think because they have a good experience, oh well, he must be a good guy. That doesn't mean anything. Okay, you might have had a good experience as a customer, but you don't know what might be going on behind closed doors. That's a big mistake people make. They're just judging their own experience and thinking, well, we know everything. You don't. You really don't. Um, I mean, these are pretty serious allegations. Like I said in that report, the allegations include a former employee being physically assaulted. Kitchen apparently grabbed him by his jacket and pushed him against the door. He jabbed another employee in the kidneys. Um, he tore the head net off another employee. An employee who had been burned was refused medical leave until the shift was over. These are very serious allegations. And if Tom Kitchen is innocent, he needs to address those. Either say these are totally false, it's not true, or prove that he is not running a culture where this sort of thing goes on. As far as I'm concerned, if you're in charge, if you're a leader, you need to set an example. But this kind of brings me into the point of this video. When we talk about bullying or we talk about abuse of power, what do we mean? I'll focus on bullying because it is a term that can be thrown around a little bit. So, what is it? Well, the stereotypical idea of a bully might be, school bully, right? And if you look at old comic books, like the Beano or whatever, it's kind of this idea of a bigger kid who kind of usually there's a very stereotypical idea of it, and and usually it's depicted as a he, throws his weight around and picks on smaller children for their lunch money and stuff. The reality is a little bit more complex, I think, because there's misconceptions around it. For one thing, a bully doesn't have to be older or physically bigger, physically stronger than their target. A bully might be younger, a bully might be not outwardly that intimidating looking, but rather it's the way they go about. I mean, we've heard of this mean girls trope, right? Where you get, particularly in American high schools, but no doubt you get it all over the world. I've heard of cases in Germany and Japan of terrible bullying, and it's truly worldwide. I've seen it in China. It definitely happens in Britain. I mean, when I say I've seen it, I don't mean personally. But actually, on that point, as a teacher, it was something that was kind of on my mind. If I ever saw that, how would I deal with it? There was one occasion where a student in front of my class, a boy, was very reserved, and I could tell something was wrong. And some of the kids around him were kind of laughing and saying stuff in Chinese. And I said to him, "Look, what happened?" And then I said, "Well, look, if something's happened, you can talk to me after class." And I was trying to be subtle about this, trying to not make a big scene. But he seemed to be in a bad mood, and he kind of stormed off. So was that bullying? It might have been. And I spoke to a colleague. I said, this is a big school. We've got 5,000 students. Do you think this sort of thing goes on? And she said it probably does. Um, she hadn't witnessed it in her classes, but I don't know what the procedure is over there. It's different in different countries, but I was sort of aware of that, and I even contemplated having a whole lesson on the subject. But as a teacher, you have to be careful drawing attention to an individual student who might be a victim of bullying can actually make the problem worse. And I never saw it explicitly. But anyway, back to the subject of the video. Yeah, we've heard about the mean girls phenomenon where you get girls who are usually they're popular, they tend to be good looking or they think they are. It was actually featured in Cobra Kai, which is a series I'm going to talk about. Great series, I really enjoyed it. I might make a video just about that. If you know the Karate Kid series, it's basically the events 35 years on. Very good series. But anyway, that Mean Girls thing, it rarely involves physical violence, but it can absolutely be just as devastating as the sort of bullying that maybe male bullies would inflict more, which is physical violence. The Mean Girls thing is vicious gossip and demeaning another girl. My younger sister went to an all-girls school, and the bullying there was absolutely appalling, worse than the bullying in my school, which was an all boys school. Um, it's a very big problem. So there's that school dynamic, but there's also the dynamic you get in boardrooms, in the workplace. I like I said in that video, I think it's rife in the catering industry. I think it happens in boardrooms. Here's the thing, though. At what point do we differentiate between bullying and just a pressurizing environment? Because there are environments that will be more pressurizing, where, if you have a busy kitchen or a busy shop or a busy boardroom, naturally there is going to be pressure. And I don't think it's unreasonable for a CEO to expect high standards. Because if they don't, then nothing gets done. Or rather, there is things fall apart. You have to have a certain degree of authority if you're a leader. This can apply in many areas. I mean, a prime minister or a president, thinking here of democracies as opposed to dictatorships, as Margaret Thatcher said, you can't exactly lead from the back. So you do need a certain degree of authority. But even in that dynamic, there's a difference between authority and just abusing power. So, in the political sense, a senior politician, for example, who pushes around uh, junior ministers or backbench MPs, I would say that would be an example of bullying in the political context. Um, But there's another thing we need to be a little bit cautious about because you also get this dynamic, particularly in recent years, of people who are overly sensitive, and they will interpret any misunderstanding or any disagreement as being bullied. Now, that also we need to be careful that that isn't kind of conflated with actual bullying, because the problem is when that is conflated, it actually trivializes actual bullying. So, for example, if someone thinks that they're seeing microaggressions, which is a term I don't like, that to me is not bullying. It's different if the person has said, for example, like let's say you ask someone where they're from, right? And they don't like the question because they feel it's insinuating you're an outsider. Okay, well, just correct them to say, well, actually, I'm British. Um, but I would say don't make a big deal about it. Now, if the person comes back and says, "Oh, you're not one of us, you're not white," or something like that, then that's definitely crossing a line, and that's being disrespectful. It's being kind of racist. And yeah, that's crossing a line. But I do think that the irony is some of the worst bullying today is actually from the woke left. And it's ironic because they're masquerading as those who are supposed to be about progress. Yet they're the ones pushing cancel culture, trying to have careers destroyed. So this is a paradox with the bullying question. Sometimes the bullying can actually be when someone is falsely accused, and then they become ironically the target of bullying. So, for example, if a particular professor is accused of sexism or racism, they might be totally innocent. They might be guilty. But this is an important thing. I think if someone's accused of bullying, they have a right to defend themselves and their reputation. But it's a real, this is something that needs to be handled very carefully. I think where there is verifiable bullying going on, there needs to be zero tolerance because it can destroy lives. But with that, it has to be crystal clear. It has to be very, and you could have a situation where, let's say, you have two students and one of them says, "I'm being bullied by this person," and the other person simply denies it. In that case, it is quite difficult for teachers to really know. So they need to be extra assertive and really try to break down the information that is available. Um, so it's difficult, but bullying can destroy lives. If you have certain environments, let's say, for example, military barracks or military unit. Obviously, it's a tough profession. You cannot go into the armed forces and be overly sensitive. You just can't. Not just because you could have a drill instructor yelling at you, but in a battlefield, you can't have that sort of mentality. Or take, for example, a boxing gym or karate dojo. Situations like this. I'm talking about a competitive karate dojo. Again, you cannot be an overly sensitive person. Because if you can't handle a boxing instructor yelling at you to, push harder or whatever it is, how on earth are you going to handle your opponent throwing a punch at your face? This is just common sense. That's clearly a very different environment from a yoga retreat. However, I still think that in the case of the military, there's a difference between being tough and expecting high discipline and standards versus abuse of power, for example, hazing. Now, to me, hazing has no place in the military. I don't think that it builds character. I don't think it does anything other than destroy the person that is targeted. There was a case in South Korea recently where a young recruit died from hazing. Um, there is absolutely no merit in that. I don't think it builds character. I don't think it builds the individual. Because if it's aimed at an individual, that's not building character. That is aimed at an individual. And again, that's to me, it's different if it's kind of equally attributed to every new recruit, but when it's targeted at an individual, that's clear bullying. It really is. You can get bullying on the level of nation states, where you have a powerful state like China throwing its weight around. Ironically, they like to claim to be the victim of bullying, which is just ridiculous. Um, the way China treats Taiwan, I would say, is a clear example of state bullying. Um, But this is actually quite a complex subject, and there's a lot of ways to look at it. Um, One thing that irritates me is people who maybe have good intentions, but they're going about it the wrong way. They say, oh, well, you just have to stand up for yourself. You just have to do this or that. Especially in a school dynamic, the target, I don't like to say the victim, the target might have tried every approach. They might have stood up for themselves, and then they also get penalized for fighting. Okay, um, they might have tried to laugh it off, and the bullies still, I'm using plural there, they still keep up. So this idea that there's a quick fix, oh, just do this and everything will be fine. Firstly, it kind of borders on victim blaming. It's putting the onus on the target rather than the bully or bullies. And secondly, it's not a one size fits all. It's not like one method will definitely work. So I think we need to recognize that it is a problem. There are people out there who use their power or authority to just push others around. This is obnoxious. This is not inspiring. And for me personally, I have a big problem with how certain people are idolized. And to me, this is not a partisan issue. It should not be left or right, because I think there are right wing bullies and left wing bullies in different ways, but they're still bullies. That's why I really have a problem with someone like Gordon Ramsay being idolized. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is a guy who has got successful by hard work, by, the fact he is a good chef, but also he is famous for yelling in people's faces. I think Gordon Ramsay's a bully, I really do. And this isn't a case of, oh, well, it's constructive criticism. What Gordon Ramsay does is he really, really belittles people. He says things, oh, young man, when I was your age, I wasn't such a loser, and so on. He gets into very, very personalized ad hominem attacks. That to me is not constructive criticism. And as far as I'm concerned, someone who can't tell the difference between constructive criticism and just abusing someone really shouldn't be idolized. Um, Donald Trump is a good example. I mean, Trump, to me, is an utterly obnoxious character. He is constantly belittling people. He's not a statesman at all. Um, he might have been president of the United States. He's not a statesman. I really find it sad that people idolize Trump. Like there's something to admire about his obnoxious personality. Like belittling people is sort of a good character trait. Um, I'm not saying everything Trump done was bad. Standing up to China was a good thing, but I do find it troubling that people who really should know better, intelligent people, think there's something about Trump to admire. And I think they do so because they think Trump is the answer to the woke left. I would argue that you could have a strong centrist figure who could stand up to that in a way that, doesn't require Trumpian behavior. Another example is Katie Hopkins, the columnist. I mean, she recently was mouthing off about going to break Australia's COVID restrictions, and then she got kicked out of Australia. Um, but not about that, more about the sort of things she's come out with over the years. She's dehumanized migrants as cockroaches. She is constantly attacking people in their appearance and this sort of thing. To me, this is a woman who isn't making intelligent arguments. She's just being obnoxious for the sake of it. I don't think she should be held up as an inspiring person. I think someone could be politically incorrect and provocative. And, for example, my attitude to crime is pretty hard line. I believe if you hurt society, you should pay a price. But is a hard line attitude to crime the same as bullying? No, I don't think it is. Because I also say that the condemned have a right to be treated humanely. I don't believe in hellhole prisons. I believe that, they have a right to due process and to be treated humanely. So I don't even say, I mean, I've spoken out against vigilantism in prison because I don't believe that that should be encouraged. So I really think that this comes down to a question of how power is used. And to me, an inspiring leader knows the fine line between utilizing power to inspire and to have authority versus just being a bully. And if you're yelling in people's faces, when you're attacking them in a very, very personalized way, that's bullying. I think that criticism of public figures is legitimate. I think if someone is in a position of power, and again, I addressed this in a recent video, a politician, a judge, a celebrity, people who are in the public eye, they need to have tough skin. They need to accept that they can be criticized. But the fine line for the public, therefore, is threats. Don't make threats. Don't troll someone with threats. Um, to give another example, the footballers who were abused recently, if certain England fans feel that they were lackluster players and they should have tried harder, or whatever it is, fair enough. That's just criticism. But when you start getting into really ad hominem attacks, certainly if they're racist, but even just on their appearance, or getting into anything deeper than their skills as a player, I would say that is it's abuse. And ultimately, what this comes down to is personality, a personality trait. Someone who kind of glorifies bullying or thinks it's something to emulate, that says a lot to me about the personality. Um, I hate abuse of power, I always have, and I hate bullies. So I feel that this video was a way to clarify what I interpret that as. I'd like to know people's thoughts on this. Thanks for watching.